All right, welcome everyone to the International Women's Writing Guild bi-monthly open mic. I'm Kelly Dumar. I'm on the board of the International Women's Writing Guild, and I moderate this wonderful bi-monthly occasion. We hold our open mics to hear you and our features twice a month, once on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern and once on Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And that's where we are tonight on October 4th, 2020. It's a delight to be here with you all. And in a moment, I will introduce our feature, Diana Eden. I also want to remind you, if you've signed up to read for tonight, we are so excited. That will happen after Diana's feature and after a brief Q&A that we can have with Diana. And I want to remind you, we do have a strict reading limit. You can read in any genre, member, non-member. We're delighted to have you and have your voice, but please always limit your reading to no more than 3 minutes. And that includes the time it takes to introduce a piece, which isn't necessary from our end, but if you decide to introduce it, we do count that as part of your 3 minutes. And I will cut you off at 3 minutes, and I hate doing it, but I will do it. And I just don't want you to take it personally, because we are always delighted to hear you, but we do really try to adhere to our very strict limit. So it's really helpful if you read and actually time yourself reading your piece before you come here. Well, I met Diana Eden for the first time. She's a member of the Guild, and I met her at our summer conference when we were at Muhlenberg a couple of years ago, and I was facilitating the play festival that we have there from the drama teaching group that I lead there at the Guild, the Play Lab. And so somebody had a play and they wanted an actor. And we have a few people who come every summer that we can always count on to act in our play festival. And somebody needed Diana and found out that she certainly was a professional actress. And she came to our play festival, and that was the first time I met her, was as a live actor in our own play festival. What a delightful surprise it was. And so it was really exciting to hear, Diana, that you wrote your memoir, Stars in Their Underwear, and that it was published. And so I was very eager to have you come into our open mic and share some readings from your memoir. But let me just introduce you by saying that Diana Eden, following a career as a dancer and an actress, she spent 30 years in Hollywood costume designing primetime television series, pilots, movies for TV, and feature films, plus dozens of stage productions. Intending to retire, she moved to Las Vegas in 2008. Instead, she continued designing films, teaching, producing costumes for Las Vegas entertainers, and writing her memoirs. She received an Emmy nomination for A League of Their Own, plus 2 more Emmy nominations for NBC's Passions. So you can, I'm going to be putting the link for how you can purchase, if you haven't already, Diana's wonderful book. And Diana, I'm just going to welcome you to the stage. And thank you so much for being here. And we would love to hear some sections that you would like to read to us from our book. But we also hope that people will be putting questions in the chat room, because I know you really like to answer questions.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for inviting me. And it's really wonderful to see so many familiar faces and names. And I think, all of these people I met first at Muhlenberg and then have kept in touch with. So it's very exciting for me. I've chosen 2 passages from my book, one from when I had just turned 15 and one from when I was about 65. They're kind of connected, which you may see when I read them. And I chose the first passage especially because the majority of it was written one night at Muhlenberg in the dorm room, because I had been so inspired by what I learned that day. So I will get started here. Just to set it up, I have just turned 15 and been hired by a professional ballet company and have traveled to Washington, D.C. So I'm pretty scared. When it's finally time to enter on stage, my knees are shaking like a tuning fork, and I can barely balance on one foot and lift my leg into arabesque. I don't make any drastic mistakes, but my poor heart beats like crazy all the way through. The life-changing moment comes at the end of Act 4 of Swan Lake. In my white tutu, my hair pulled back, my white swan feathers folding around my head, my pale pink point shoes tied around my feet with the pink satin ribbons, I get to experience my first goosebump moment on stage. It's the moment in the performance that will keep me coming back, wanting to reach that high again and again. The swans have gathered, and as Tchaikovsky's music swells and builds, the lights dim and then flash like lightning. Crash, boom goes the bass drum, the music building in intensity, louder and louder. We run in tiny steps faster and faster, raising our swan arms until, at the climactic moment, we hit the formation of a cross, lunge position, head down, arms outstretched to the side in defiance. All movement stops, cymbals clash, and shivers run down my spine. The wicked von Rothbart and Odile are dead. We have broken the evil spell. All will be well from now on, and I have found where I belong. A year after that incredible moment, I skip up the stairs to the second-floor ballet studio in Toronto for my daily dance class. I change into my pink tights and my black scoop neck leotard. And about to take my place at the bar, I'm called into artistic director Celia Franca's office, where I sit down with excited expectation, not knowing I'm about to be hit by some news that will change everything. And I never saw it coming. Diana, I need to tell you that we are very sorry, but we can no longer promise you a position in the National Ballet Company. You have grown too tall. Too tall? A year ago, I was 5'6" and dancing in Swan Lake. Now I'm 5'8", and you're saying I'm too tall? You are too tall for the corps de ballet. You're not ready to be a soloist. And who, in fact, could partner you and lift you? You're over 6 foot on point, Miss Franca tells me. And you're too young for character roles. As if I want them. Are there any other companies, I ask? What about New York? Well, Balanchine might take you into the New York City Ballet. He likes his dancers tall, but you'd have to lose some weight. He likes them bone thin. I leave her office. Class has already begun. My friends, Jossie, Bev, Judith, and the twins are already past the pliés and tendus and into the rond de jambes. Without breaking position, their eyes follow me as I streak across the floor and into the dressing room. Why should I take class now? What is the point? I quickly dress back into street clothes and descend the stairs back onto Pape Avenue. Tears begin to well up, but it's too soon for tears of loss. It's rage. How could they do this to me? How could they reject me so completely and with such finality? How could they tempt me with a taste of the footlights, the music, the costume, the feeling of dancing with the company in Washington, D.C., a taste of what was ahead of me, and then snatch it all away for 2 inches, for 2 fucking inches. I reach Queen Street and wait for the red and cream streetcar to amble towards me as if it has all the time in the world. I get on. Strangers get on, strangers get off. No one notices my wet face. Mom and Dad are sitting in the drawing room when I get home, hands neatly folded in their laps, their heads back and eyes closed, listening to a symphony on the gramophone. They like to do that after dinner. Mom puts a finger to her lips, indicating for me not to interrupt, as they are in those final moments of their Brahms ecstasy before they have their musical orgasm. I head upstairs to my room, my pain not acknowledged. I have been robbed of my identity as much as I've been robbed of my future. Who am I now? Nobody. No Giselle for me, no Odette Odile, no Princess Aurora. I am 16 and too young to be a has-been, a reject. And yet I am invisible again. 45 years later, I'm costume designing a film in Vancouver with Tony Danza, Leah Thompson, and Betty White. Second reading. Leah and I get along really well. One Sunday, a day off, the two of us take the cable car up to the top of Grouse Mountain, across the bay from the main city of Vancouver. I heard there was a nice ski lodge up there with a magnificent view out over the snow to the city far below. Sitting at the bar, we discovered that we have had similar experiences in our early years. Leah has also danced ballet professionally at the young age of 14. She says, when I was 20, Mikhail Baryshnikov told me that, although I was a lovely dancer, I didn't have the right body to be a successful ballerina. He told her she would not be accepted into the main American Ballet Theatre Company, even though she was already in the junior company. I get chills as she describes her experience. Oh my God, her too. All that hard work, passion, commitment, and then her ballet career snatched away. Right heart, wrong body. Were you devastated, I ask? Of course, she says. But in a way, it was a good thing. I could have been banging my head against the wall for another 10 years. The commonality of our experiences gives me comfort. I had thought perhaps in my self-centric world that my pain was unique. And now here I am, sitting at a bar on top of a mountain with a star whose life is parallel to mine in so many ways. And life is good for both of us. My other great joy on this film is working with Betty White again. Betty is everything you hope she will be. Upbeat, always cheerful, and with a wicked sense of humor. Betty is playing the owner of a model train store, and the store is decked out in full holiday regalia with lights and decorations. Model trains move along their little tracks past tiny villages and over make-believe bridges. One day on set, she has one of the Lionel engines in her hand and turns it over to look at the bottom side. What on earth am I doing, she quips. Am I looking to see if it's a boy or a girl? One evening, after Friday's shooting, I'm at the Vancouver airport catching a late night flight back to LA, and I'm walking the long hallway to get to the gate. Suddenly, one of the airport's motorized carts goes whizzing by at quite some speed, carrying Betty to the same gate. When I finally catch up with her, she's so apologetic, saying how badly she feels that she got to ride and I had to walk. That is Betty, totally humble, totally genuine. I ask her if she's going into LA for a guest appearance of some kind, and she says, "Oh no, darling, I just miss my dogs too much." And that too is Betty. That's it.
Oh, feel free to unmute everybody too. Round of applause. Thank you so much. Wow, and please feel free to put any questions that you have for Diana in the chat room, and I will get to them. Diana, it was all funny and poignant, beautifully described, and particularly, yeah, I felt really emotional in very much riveted in this, and particularly the first segment that you read from 15 and that moment of change and devastation. I'm just wondering what it was like for you to go from, just tell us a little bit more about the process. You say it was inspired right after a workshop at IWW.
Yes, I was taking Judy Hughey's workshop on memoir, and I had written the first draft of my book, first book for me, basically. And I had done what most first writers do, I think, which is just say, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then I did this. And in Judy's class, I was starting to realize that each chapter must have an arc, beginning, middle, and an end. And also we talked about not telling the audience, the readers, what happened, but letting them experience it. And I realized that in talking about when I got fired from the ballet company, I just said, you know, I got fired and it was terrible. And I went back to the dorm that night and I thought, I've got to remember this. And
Mhm.
I started to go back in my memory and remember going up the steps to class and
Mhm.
then down the stairs and walking to the streetcar and just feeling like my life was over. And so that whole section was written at Muhlenberg, and I'm grateful for that.
Beautiful example, really beautiful example, because I really felt the experience of the arc as a listener, and was really drawn into not only the real sort of time experience of the 15-year-old getting this terrible news, but this wonderful, having you read it tonight personally, it was so beautiful to see you at your age now, at your maturity now, at the other side of like a devastating experience like that, reading so beautifully about that experience. So it's just wonderful. I see some questions in the chat room. So let me go to, you've captured the world of ballet so that it comes alive for your readers, whether they're familiar with the world or not. You're an amazing storyteller and a wonderful actress. What a terrible experience. I know how hard it is to get to that level of dancing. So glad you developed such an exciting career. So that was not a question, but that's okay. We're glad to have that comment.
Well, thank
Um,
you.
and then somebody says, Sally says, what was the transition between the dancing years and the designing years?
Um, Quite a long one. I did bang my head against the wall for a long time. Not as well. I went from ballet to Broadway and became a Broadway dancer, which I was quite successful at, and did 3 Broadway shows, and then transitioned to acting roles, and that's where, you know, I got stuck. And I did, you know, I worked as an actress for quite a few years, but it really wasn't going the way I wanted to. And I moved out to LA and I just felt lost and frustrated and disappointed. And a chance meeting with someone who was a producer for Anne Margaret and her big nightclub act um, changed everything, because he invited me to work on the costumes for the dancers, her backup dancers and singers. And through that opportunity, I met Bob Mackie. And Bob Mackie invited me to be his assistant for a huge project, the Jubilee Show here up in Las Vegas. So I transitioned kind of naturally. I never made a deadline where I said, all right, you know, in 9 more months, I'm not going to act anymore. It just kind of happened.
Kind of seamlessly, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's see, there's another question. When did the feelings at 16 shift to your next step in life?
Well, I had to finish high school, and you know, I then I went to university and I took 4 years and got my BA in history of art. And I found myself almost immediately back, you know, in dancing in all of the college shows and acting in the college shows. So by the time I got to my 3rd year, I knew that I was still going to dance. It just wouldn't be in Swan Lake. And I made plans to go to New York and be on Broadway. And lo and behold, it happened.
And what was that shift like, to shift from ballet to dancing in a show, modern dance?
I had to retrain. Once I got to New York, I realized that my dancing was very balletic, which is all kind of up and poised, and jazz dancing, which is sort of what we called the Broadway dancing at the time, was much, you know, the center of gravity was much lower. It was much more asymmetrical and organic in a way. So I took class every day and I studied with some amazing jazz teachers in New York. And, you know, I adapted. I had to.
Mm-hmm. And have you worked with young women, particularly dancers, about body image issues? I'm wondering, Lynn Hess is asking that, and I'm wondering if part of that, that was so poignant, the reading about the 15-year-old, the height, and then
Yeah.
the thinness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, so
Well, I mean, the
about
truth
that.
is for dancers, you are expressing yourself with your body. And as much as the world has tried to say you're wonderful the way you are, um, dancers have to, dancers and athletes have to be a certain way physically. Um, Now, the height I could do nothing about. But, as a young dancer, I was always eating, cottage cheese and fruit and wishing I could have a chocolate milkshake. And even through the Broadway years, one has to watch one's weight because you're on stage and you are representing a certain um, aesthetic. And I played Ginger Rogers in one of the musicals I did, and no one wants a fat Ginger Rogers. I mean, they just don't. So I have not worked with women, young women, on that particular thing. No.
Sally Stevens says that Bob Mackie was part of the team when I worked on Danny Kaye TV variety show in the early 60s. He wasn't brilliantly famous yet. Yes, the young assistant. Um, what can you give us any kind of an anecdote about Bob Mackie?
Well, I learned everything that I needed to be a good costume designer from Bob. Um, he is a perfectionist. He is into every detail of the costume, and as his assistant, I got to watch him um, greet the actors as they came through the door, be it Cher or Carol Burnett or Lucille Ball, or, I got to see him sketching. I got to see him go upstairs in the workroom and look at the patterns. I got to see him fitting the actors. Um, and, the idea that a costume designer just sits and does a beautiful sketch and then hands it off to the worker bees, not true with Bob, and really not true with very many designers. So I got the best training I could possibly have got. I didn't need to go and do 5 years of costume school because I saw Bob Mackie doing.
Well, do you think also, I'm curious about, I mean, clearly art was something that seemed to be of great interest to you. And you said you majored in art, I think, did you say art history?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And do you think that was part of what set you up maybe perhaps to move into costuming? And was that
Well,
a value to you or you
the
graduated?
honest truth is I had to choose something because I had to go to college. And it was the closest thing to what I like to do. There were no theatrical programs at the time. You couldn't get a BA in theater arts. It just didn't exist. So art seemed like a good compromise. And yes, I did learn to draw, and I studied all paintings through the century. And the funny thing is, when I did go back and take a few evening courses in history of costume, I find myself looking at the same old paintings all over again as research.
Hmm. So I'm also curious, Diana, about, you talked a little bit about the craft aspect of what you learned about in writing your memoir, how,
Yeah.
to really have every chapter have an arc and all. But I'm
Mhm.
curious about what the process, what your takeaway maybe just personally. I mean, you've gone through your life, a certain aspect of your life, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering about any kind of takeaway in terms of what you learned about yourself, or is there anything you were really glad that you discovered in the process
Hmm.
writing your memoir?
Um, the interesting thing is in researching um, the past for my book, I read for the very first time all of the letters that I wrote home to my mother and father
Mm.
once I'd left home. And it was kind of fascinating to hear my young voice. Um, Quite a bit of humor, but also I struggle terribly with depression. And so a lot of my, letters and diaries were pretty depressing. And I put glimpses of that in the book, but, too much is not good. I guess it just feels like my legacy. I realized how many twists and turns there were to my journey, and how somehow I was a survivor and a fighter. And it does give me some perspective when I talk to younger people about their careers. Um, not to look at the end game as much as the journey, because you'll go nuts if you have too much of a specific goal in mind. You have to kind of go where the world's going to take you, and you have to readjust and you have to retrain. You can't just flop about from career to career. And so I guess I'm proud of my commitment and my fighting spirit. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but I'm here.
Yes, yes. It's lovely to hear you say that. I'm proud of my fighting spirit too. One last question, I think I'm curious about, you've had so many stages to your career,
Yeah.
seems normal, and interesting, many of them fascinating. I mean, and from the ballet to the costume designing, and then in between the Broadway shows. Um, if you look back, is there an era of your career that you say was the time when maybe you felt the most whole or the most satisfied, or?
Well, I think the latter half of my life, when I really started to um, be successful as a costume designer and feel successful within myself, it took a while there too. There's nothing like success to make you feel good. And it takes a long time to get there. But there were times when I'd be working with an actor and I would be in a fitting with them, and it would just kind of all go together suddenly. It would be that sweet spot,
Mm.
and the actor would suddenly beam and say, I never found the character until I put on this hat, and I think, I did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was quite tormented for much of my life, and hopefully a lot more at peace now.
Oh, good. We're so glad.
Yeah.
We're so glad you moved through the torment parts.
Yeah.
And really wonderful, so wonderful to hear you talk about what the fascinating
Thank you.
experiences and wonderful reading. And as others are saying, what a talented woman you are. And
Thank you.
we're going to appreciate having you here, Diana, with us, listening to all the wonderful readers who are going to come after you. And I just want to remind you that please feel free to read the chat. And there are many comments in there you probably haven't had a chance to read yet. And so as we shift perspective here, we're going to move. I'm going to invite Katerina to let us go through that list one more time, because Katerina Conan is so wonderful. While I'm talking to Diana, I know that she's like scarfing through to see who's here and who's not here yet and who's on our list, and she's checking the list and making it twice. So thank you, Katerina, for doing that. I'm going to remind everybody, first of all, I'm going to turn off the recording now. Again, thank you. Wonderful to have you with us, Diana.
Thank you.